All right, what is going on, everyone? Welcome to another Tuesday Night Live here at the Serious Angler Podcast. Tonight we have an awesome guest. We're bringing back our good friend, Destin DeMarion. As you can tell, it is just I, the captain, Andrew Full tonight. Bailey is down in Alabama at Lake Eufaula practicing and getting ready for his Hobie Kayak series on Lake Eufaula. And I was talking to him earlier today, and I think he's having more fun chasing the gators around than he is catching bass. But I think he's got a little deal he's figured out, so it's pretty exciting. Hopefully he does well. So this week you guys are stuck with me, and I apologize. I'm the one who's running the social media, so if it seems kind of funky, that is why. Next thing up, guiding for me is going to start here in the next few days, and we're pretty much booked all the way through the end of June at this point. So it's going to be pretty busy if you are looking to book a guide trip with me personally. We're going to be looking July through October, but also Destin, who we are going to have on tonight, is also a guide out of Presque Bay in Erie, Pennsylvania. So if you guys also want to book a trip with him, that is something that you are able to do. But without further ado, let's get Destin on here. What's up, dude? How are you?
Hey, what's up, buddy? It's been a long time.
Yeah, too long, especially in person. You got to get back up here and we'll eat some chicken wings.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe next week, hopefully.
Yeah, if you do next week, we should plan Thursday because that's my day off next week.
Perfect.
Yeah, so
I will keep that in mind.
Yeah, so let's make it happen. So so man, what's going on this year? How's 2022 going for you so far?
It's kind of been a slow start to the tournament fishing side of things. Guide stuff is pretty much booked up until the summertime. I really don't have anything till July open, unless somebody cancels or weather or something. But yeah, it's kind of not how I wanted to tournament wise so far. We still got a few events, so it's not really how you start, it's how you finish, and even though it started kind of poorly for me, unfortunately, I want to keep that momentum going in the forward direction, in the next three events, which we're going to Oneida soon, a couple months is the next event. So a little bit closer to home and, fish there quite a bit. So hopefully we can have one of those good tournaments because Oneida is pretty stingy. It's like a place like the James River where you can do good or do bad, even if you know what you're doing. So
now, Oneida, is that the 4th of July weekend?
It is.
Like the weekend
it's going to be a zoo.
That is some poor planning, if you ask me. I wouldn't want to go anywhere near that lake that weekend.
Yeah, that's probably what I'll be showing up to. So it'll be a wild scene out there, I can imagine.
What is like the big boat race they have out there all the time with like the huge fountain boats and stuff?
Oh no, I didn't even know, but I don't think I've ever been there that time of year. So
You've never been there when they do like the 600 boat race and they're all like fountain boats? Yeah, it's not fun. The entire lake is a boat wake. So yeah,
joy.
Yeah, let's hope that stays away.
Wonderful.
So
yes, maybe it'll be raining or something.
Yeah, fingers crossed, right? Even though I fished a tournament there, I think like 8 years ago, and it was like downpouring rain, and they still ran that like whatever that boat race is. Yeah, and you could hear them coming from. We were down like by Lewis Point area, like way down east on the lake, and you could hear them coming for like 3 miles. And we're like, oh boy, this ain't good.
I've seen those other places, but I don't think I've ever seen that when I've been at Oneida. So yeah, I'm about to though. It seems like.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not that weekend. I don't think they do it all the time, but it seemed like every time I went there, it happened. No, if
maybe
it was
like
a weekday
weekend, they'll do it.
Yeah, who knows?
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, hold on. Stay on the boat. That's all I can say is the best advice. But you've been pretty busy working some fishing shows too, right? Down at Susquehanna and then the Classic and any other one. You're at the Columbus show too, right?
Yeah,
how are all those?
For a day. Yeah, just working for Phoenix and Cashin at a few different shows and stuff. The Classic's always really fun. The other ones are good too, but I just love the Classic. I mean, I'd much rather be fishing it, but it's just cool because you can see everybody from all over in one place, and it's just great for, networking and just catching up with, people, and it's a great place to, build sponsor relations too. So, I mean, it's a great opportunity. And actually before the Classic and kind of simultaneously, I was doing a lot of customer trips for Dura Edge because we have a lot of customers down in that area. So we went to Lake Erie, a few days and caught some really nice spotted bass, which was fun. And then I've been doing a lot more of those trips intermittently when I'm been traveling. So we've had some good trips with some college guys, pro guys, all over the Southeast.
Now, let me ask you this one, and you can refuse the answer. Do you like doing those trips more or actual guide trips?
That's close. I mean, I have to say those just because it's like almost always somewhere I have no understanding of, like just going fishing some random place that I don't know anything about. So just getting to try to learn about it really quick and get up to speed, and it makes it more fun. And it's just cool because it's usually only one. It's either one guy, maybe two guys a lot of times. So it's really, personal. I can go, hang out on the boat and get to know, people really well, and in a very, fun environment, at least for me. I think everybody pretty much enjoys it. It's just such a chill way to go out and hang out.
And you also get to cook some hamburgers and hot dogs for the crew members, don't you usually? Like a Destin cookout master chef?
Done a couple of those this year. I've done a lot more fishing trips than those, but I've done a lot of those cookouts. My grill has got quite a few miles on it since we started doing that. It's been about 4 years since we started doing that, I think. So it's been pretty cool. I mean, I've gotten to know a lot of people, have a lot of really good relationships, in the groundskeeping sports turf world, which is really fun because, I mean, those guys are very much like us in the same sense that we just all love the outdoors. We like working outdoors. We're not generally, the office life is not, for most of, us, but, it's a good time and with a lot of like-minded people.
Yep. And that's the best part. And you get to see a lot of really cool places as well and go in and out of awesome stadiums, which I think is the part I'm most envious about is some of those baseball fields. People don't realize how like intricate and beautiful they are on the inside. So
you guys have a nice one right there. I mean, the Buffalo Bison is a really nice stadium, and I'm good friends with Cal. I've taken him fishing a couple times, and I probably might take him. I was thinking about taking him next week. We were talking about it. So, I've got to see the Bison Stadium. It's really nice. I've been so many like MLB stadiums, minor league, colleges. It's a lot of stadiums I never would have seen if I wasn't doing this. So it's been a really nice byproduct of it all. There's no question.
It's a great experience. So we can digress here and now we'll jump into the topic of the show, which is spring fishing and the Great Lakes and the bays and like progression of fish and how we catch them. So as you know, it's coming into spring here now, like post-winter pattern. So as the fish are pulling out of the deep abyss of the Great Lakes, what would you say is your favorite way to target them and where do you look first?
Man, favorite way is kind of a tie. I mean, I think you would agree after getting on the blade bait thing that is one of the most fun ways to catch them in those cold water months.
Yeah.
And it's not just pigeonholed to, the cold water time, but that's definitely when it shines. And that jigging that blade and it just stops and just wrenching back on you, that's a fun bite. That's definitely how I like to target them right off the get-go. Mm-hmm. One of the best ways to catch them when the water's still really cold up until they start kind of getting real active. But the other way would be a jerkbait. And it's similar. You kind of go into jerk it and you just feel a fish pull back on it. And it's also an equally fun bite. But I think, like I said, the blade bait thing kind of starts first. So like Andy, we were just talking about it, before the show. a big problem we have is the water's really muddy on the lake a lot of times this year because of the wind. So where I live, we have Presque Bay, which is just a peninsula surrounds an area of water, and it's only got a small opening on the east side of it. So it's very protected. That's where a lot of the fish come to spawn from the lake. So there's a mass, migration there. So they're pretty much there right off the get-go. And it's a lot shallower than the average depth on the lake per se. It stays cleaner because those winds generally don't affect it quite as much. So they're pushing in there. They're going to start out deep too. I mean, that's when you're catching them on that blade bait. They're working their way. We've got the chute, which they keep a dredge section of it for shipping. They're coming through there. It's a stopping and going point. They're always moving through there at that until summertime basically. And that's kind of the migration route you want to follow them. I mean, you can catch them out in 20 feet, 25 feet early on, and then you just kind of follow them onto those shallower flats where they're going to spawn, really.
Yeah, and I agree. You guys are lucky with Presque Bay in the fact that you're pretty protected. Up here in Buffalo, we just have a couple break walls with a lot of current.
Yes.
So if we get any wind on the main lake and like the creeks flowing in, because I think there's like 15 creeks that dump in. So we've had like this mass influx of rain and snow in the last week, and then 40, 50 mile an hour west winds. So our shoreline is all torn up. But like in your situation inside the bay, the water stays clear. But each break wall entrance that we have, and I think we have like 4 prominent ones, it all sucks in or sucks out. So the mud just like circulates around. And I drove by there today, and there was 2 areas of green water, and they were in 6 inches of water next to the beaches. I was like, yep, yeah. I'm not going to be catching a bass anytime soon.
No, it doesn't sound like it.
No,
I mean, but it's a similar situation where you guys live because you do have the harbor and it's protected by the walls. But yeah, that current with the river mouth, it's not doing you favors there because it's circulating it into there and making all that muddy water. Because we don't have that. I mean, other than wind driven, we'll get some current if we're going to backflow there if it pushes hard in or pushes hard out or whatever. It'll come back in, but there's only like one small tributary in Presque, very small creek. It doesn't, do enough. It can't do enough damage.
Yeah, you're lucky. So what would you?
Yes.
Yeah. What would you say is the like prime water temp for that blade bait to kick off where you're at down in Erie? Where I'm at in Buffalo, I know it's just kind of starting now at like that 40-degree mark. We just hit 40. So is that similar?
It is. It's very much. I like 40. I've caught them in the mid upper 30s, but it's just not. They're super lethargic at that point. Usually, once the water dips below 40. It's kind of hit and miss as far as just activity level with the fish. But, yeah, once we hit 40, it starts getting good. And that's the other thing about Presque. Like I said, it's a little bit shallower. And there's a lot of bays, on the Great Lakes that are similar to that. They warm up quicker. So whatever the lake temperature is, the bay is going to be at least a few degrees warmer than that just because it's shallow, a lot of dark bottom bays in it that are going to warm up super quick. Not a lot of like you said, I mean, you guys have a lot of current and different things going. We don't have as much of that other than wind driven.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the crazy part is like Presque is relatively shallow. All the bays on my part of the lake are virtually deep. Like they have 3 to 4 foot on them, but they drop instantly into like 30 foot, like 15 to 100 yards away from the shoreline in spots. Right. So it's crazy how much different like the bays are, but yours is more natural, right? Presque is a natural bay as to where Buffalo is a man-made harbor with break walls. Right. So,
I don't think you could get into Presque if they didn't man-made, manually dredge it every year. Yeah, I think it would have ultimately just silted itself around and in, and then the bay would have silted in for the most part if they didn't keep it open. But I mean, I'm not complaining. It's really nice because it's created a really good spawning area for the fish that's consistent. the water can get somewhat dirty, but usually it's much clearer than the lake at this time of year because the lake's just getting pounded with wind.
So virtually like off of this conversation, you're talking about jerkbait. So if somebody wanted to come to Lake Erie and they were going to, let's say, like the Indiana, Ohio section, or even Michigan, where it dumps into Lake Erie, since those bays over there, that's a shallower, warmer basin, those people that go to fish that area might be more inclined to throw a jerkbait first. It would be my impression because it's shallower water, right?
Yeah,
So,
it very well could be. I mean, we catch them on a jerkbait pretty quickly. I think a lot of the fish, even if it's cold, they move up quick, and it's just based on where the bait is, and that bait will start moving up quickly, and they're coming to them, and I mean you can catch them, less than 15 feet pretty quickly, and I'm sure that's very similar. I know even some of the tributaries on other parts of the lake, like where they start moving up in those rivers and
like
things
staging.
like that. Yeah, really quick. And a lot of those rivers are getting, some warmer runoff. It's probably warming up those places quickly, and the bait's going in there. A lot of nutrients being washed in. So, I mean, the smallmouth are. I mean, just as I know, those suckers just move on you. And the reason being is a lot of times they're just relating to bait. They're moving, they're following them. Wherever the biggest concentration of bait is, they're going to be following them. And this is a normal migration. The walleye, a lot of them are coming in the tributaries to spawn and stuff. Smallmouth will go in there to spawn somewhat too. But a lot of it's just following the food.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like the emerald shiner is such an integral part of the baitfish system in the Great Lakes and Lake Erie, or alois, whatever.
Alois, yep, that's what I was going to say.
Gizzard shad too.
Shad.
It's funny, as soon as, like, because I'm a big steelhead fisherman, right? As soon as I see any type of minnow action at the mouth of the creeks that move in like that first quarter mile, I'm like, within any day, the smallmouth are going to be here, and they always show up.
Right.
Like within a day
following
or two.
that bait, same.
Yep. So they just always want to eat.
They do, and that's what makes them so frustrating sometimes, because a lot of times that bait's just moving, with the wind and all that, and it's hard to really stay with them per se, because it is just more about just where the bait's going. And if it's a flat or something like that, they could be anywhere on that flat. I mean, obviously, paying attention to the wind direction is going to help get you closer to them, but there's places that, they might stop, but aren't necessarily going to stay, and depending on where the bait is, it's going to scatter them around and move them around a little bit. So it can, I mean, it's basically this in the fall, fish are concentrating. However, if you could go out there and not do good just based on bait moving, etc., but you could also run into a mother load of fish. And this is the time of year. If you catch one, there's almost always plenty more with it.
Yeah, I agree. Now, like a surprise bait, and it might not even be like a surprise, right? As soon as the ice comes off the lake, what would you say is the number one bait to catch? Hold on. Could you hear me okay there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So what would you say is the number one bait to catch a smallmouth on from like 36 to 40 degree water? I'm curious. That's outside of blade bait. I know what my guess is.
Not a blade bait?
First choice, not a blade bait. I know what my choice is. So I'm
curious. Say a net or a Demiki.
Yeah. As soon as the ice comes off the lake, the first bait I always throw is a Ned rig, because
so good.
It's a do nothing bait and mimics a goby really well, and those gobies in that cold water do not move.
Yeah, very true.
And another thing too, like when you get up shallow, that I found, and a lot of people don't realize that crawfish don't truly hibernate. And I realized this past winter. I was steelhead fishing in January on one of our local creeks, and I see this giant soft shell crawfish walking around on the bank, and I was like, there's no way. The water is 32 degrees. And sure enough, I flipped over a rock and there was like 4 more.
Wow.
So up shallow, I'm thinking like some of my first fish I catch around the harbor are in like 2 to 5 foot of water on a Ned rig on like a sun-beaten bank. And I know that there's obviously gobies there, but I've seen crawfish there before as well. So I'm
I
like,
think
they're
that's
up there eating
underestimated,
craws.
honestly, how much crawfish are still a part of that whole
Yeah.
chain. Because, I mean, before the gobies, that was pretty much what they were feeding on.
Yeah.
I mean, to the extent they're feeding on gobies now. And they're still in here, and they definitely still are part of that smallmouth's diet. There's no question. And
They love
sometimes
them.
I think more than others, like they're keen on them.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, the one thing like, and now we're kind of talking like spring fishing here, but the one thing I have learned to do is look, because when you catch spring smallmouth in a pre-spawn, they're poop, right? Like if they're goby eaters, their poop tends to be like a grayish brown. If they're
Yeah.
eating crawfish, they'll get tints of green and orange in it. And
Yeah, I've noticed the orange definitely with the crawfish.
so when I
And
catch,
sometimes how their mouths are too. They're more beat
Mhm.
up when they're eating crawdads a lot of
Yeah.
times.
they gotta get them out of those sharp rocks. And
Mhm.
that's what keyed me into the crawfish, like the Ned rig bite super shallow. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago because I caught one on a swim bait, just slowly rolling a swim bait, but I hooked it on the outside of the jaw, like it just swiped at it, and he pooped all over my deck. And I was like, "Oh, you little jerk!" So I throw him back, and I look at it, I'm like, "That looks like crawfish poop." So I tied up a Ned rig and threw it in there next cast, and I caught like 13, 14 fish in a row. And I was like, "Ah."
I
And that's
think
when the light bulb went off.
you guys have a really, really prevalent crawfish population, especially with the river there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what keeps it so good around the mouth of that.
Yep. I would agree with that. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've thrown fish in my life while fishing a river derby, and all that's in there is crawfish like craws in my live well, no remnants of gobies whatsoever.
Yeah, I think those river fish are definitely, keen on, they'll eat everything, but I think
Yeah.
the crawdads are way bigger part of their diet than
Yeah.
just the lake dwellers.
Yeah, I
You see
would
that Thousand
agree.
Islands too. You
Yeah.
will see that.
And you can tell too by like the way the fish is designed and shaped, right? The crawfish eaters tend to be longer and more slender because they're current driven fish, or they're more pelagic. And then your big bulbous gobyitis fat slobs are the ones
Yeah.
that are just chowing on the gobies, and they're all
Like
gonna
the
die
ones
at
we
like
caught a couple falls ago. That picture you guys just posted for the show, I was like, dude, those fish were just absurdly fat. Like that was
Yeah.
insane.
What did we think we had when we came in? Like 25, 26 pounds. It's like there's
Yeah, I think so.
I was
think
like,
we had like 26 maybe.
it's like, oh gosh. When we pulled them out, we're like that was still like that day I will never forget. It was so
Oh
much
heck
fun.
no. Well, the other time before that, you and I we finished second to Jeff and
Yeah.
Brad, of course.
Yeah.
They sandbagged till the end. We had the lead until they came, and I knew
Yeah.
they had 26 or 7 or whatever. But
Yeah. We had like 25 and a half or 26.
yeah, but when we came in, I was like, oh, we're going to get
It's
smoked, dude. We got like 22 pounds. And you're like, no, I think we got more than that. We had like a 6 and like 25 something. And I was like, yeah, I guess we did.
Yeah, and they squeaked us out for lunker by like a half an ounce.
Yep.
Jerk. So it was funny. So now we're out of like the winter stage, right? And now we're moving up into the true pre-spawn.
Yes.
These fish are up. And I know my favorite way to catch them, and I think I know yours, and it's a jerkbait. So if you had to work through like an arsenal of jerkbaits and where you're targeting these fish, how do you start with that jerkbait? Do you go shallow? Are you looking for like a point, an underwater point? Are you looking for a flat? How do you target these fish with
we
that
have
jerkbait?
a lot, like in Presque, I mean, that's where my frame of reference is, and the lake too. It's just a lot of flats. Yeah. I mean, most of it's just flats. And in Presque, I mean, the flats are shallow. It's just sandy bottom, and it's a very, very slow taper out. So, I mean, like I was saying about the bait, they could be anywhere in those flats. So a lot of the times it is relatively shallow fishing, because I generally consider shallow less than 20 feet. And that's based on the lake, because usually in the spring, once it clears up, you can see almost 20 feet down.
Yeah,
So that's
100%.
shallow for me, and I know it gets that clear where you're at too. So I'm really I like to start deeper, especially when it's colder, and just see if they're, wadded up there and they'll eat a jerkbait. But I oftentimes find myself going in a little bit shallower, even when it's still cold, and finding them, in less than, 15 feet, less than 10 sometimes. It just depends on, the water temp and stuff. But I mean, they're obviously coming there. So as it gets closer to the spawn, they're obviously pretty shallow. A lot of them are. And I just that's the progression. I'll start, where I've been catching them on a blade, just a little bit around those areas if I can get a jerkbait down. And there's some jerkbaits like now, well, you can do it with any jerkbait, honestly, but like that new Berkeley one, the Stunna, it's a slow sinker. So even with your live, your active target, whatever you're using, I use active target, but you can see it slow sinking. You can get it down to a deeper depth and fish it, pretty effectively down in that depth range, even with one that's not like a Megabass +2, which it's a good bait. It gets down deeper, but with that large bill, it kind of kills the action of it.
I've
got a little smaller bill. You can fish it. It's going to look a lot more natural. It's going to give you a better action than, the +2. +1 doesn't really kill the action too much, but I mean, you can take a shallower jerkbait and weight it, with bigger hooks, or people use lead strips, whatever, you suspend dots, and you can just get it to slow sink, and you can get it down there deeper.
It's funny that you brought up the +2, and last year I threw it for the first time because it came out last year, I think, right?
Yeah, either last year or the year before.
And it's funny with that bait, you can't fish it traditionally like you would with a jerkbait and hit it. It's more of like a sweep.
It's a sweeper.
Like you have to like change your jerkbait angle the way you're hitting the rod to get that bait to like pull. And what it does when you pull at the end of it, you can give it just a little tap, and that it'll like pull and then just turn slightly. Like it's not a very erratic bait.
No,
and you have to fish it on super light line. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's not one that I generally reach in the box for very much, especially just the fact that you can weight them and do what you need to do to get them deeper in other ways and still keep that action of it.
So here's a question real fast from Bootleg Bass Fishing. Have you tried the 13 Fishing Loco Special?
Well, I know Andy's answer that because we were just talking about that. I personally have not. Andy just had some pretty good luck with that one.
Well, I actually didn't have personal luck. I went fishing with two buddies.
Oh, he's the one that caught him?
My buddy Andy absolutely schwacked us with that 13 Loco Special. And his direct quote was, "I only like the shallow one. I can't catch him on the deep one." But I will tell you,
there you go.
He took me to school on a jerkbait. I think he caught like 9-1 in like 10 casts.
It can be like that. Like jerkbait fishing, there's such intricacies to it that, I mean, that's how it could be. You can be in the boat with somebody fishing the exact same spot and you're catching them and they're not. It can be like that, very much so. And on presque, I've seen it a lot.
Yeah, I think jerkbaits is one of those few techniques that on certain days, the certain bait, the certain color, certain line size is going to get outbit over anything else. It's kind of surreal. Like
I see it a lot because I get to fish with when I'm guiding and stuff, or just fishing with my friends. I usually want to throw something different just to see. And sometimes, a buddy or something will throw something. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't look very good. That's not going to work. And it'll catch them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's just based on, them not seeing it as much, staying shallower, getting a little bit deeper, something of that nature, just having a more muted action or a more aggressive action. Those little things, depending on the day, can make a big difference. I definitely tweak colors and the action on the jerkbaits quite a bit.
Yeah, it's with smallmouth too, like particularly, I found like 3 colors work really well. Something that's really shiny and metallic, like the was it GG Deadly Black Shad? I really like that color
Yeah,
for
with that
smallmouth.
chrome side.
Yep. Then like an albino pearl white,
Yep.
and then just something really off the wall like a Western clown. Like if I had 3 jerkbait colors, those would be the 3 that I go with. It
I like the albino. I like a translucent one. I
mhm.
want something really translucent that they're not going to get a good look at when it's the water's really clear or it's like not blowing that hard when it's tough to get a jerkbait bite. And then, um, then I'll just try some crazy, like you were saying. I'll just try some weird colors and occasionally. But those two, I pretty much just flip flop between that.
Yeah, I lied there real fast. I apologize. One of the other colors I really like too is Itto Natural on the 110. Like that
Mm-hmm.
color, for whatever reason, last year, that's all they would eat, besides the Western Clown. And I know nobody up here throws Western Clown on a jerkbait, especially the Megabass one. And you'd be surprised it's actually quite translucent,
The
which is
Western Clown one,
it is, yeah,
really.
with that big bright red head, and they always get it head first, like in their throat, every
Just
time.
they're keen on the red.
Yeah, and it's very, very translucent, and it has really good reflection underneath the water. So, oh, Ryan Hartman says,
Yeah.
"What's up,
Hey
boys?"
Ron, what's up, buddy?
And then he got mad because nobody responded. That's funny. But
Hey, we just did.
yeah, but Jim
We were
Johnson,
deep in jerkbait conversation.
yes, Jim Johnson has a great point here. Biggest thing is a line diameter, and I think this is a very under talked about part of line, because if you go to the store, right, and you pick 4 different boxes of fluorocarbon in the same line, like pound test, all 4 of them could have a different line diameter. So like
Very true.
100% trilene or to like a Sunline FC Sniper, the one could almost be like 14-pound test, even though it's 10, and the other one might be like 7-pound test, even though it's 10. So
Oh,
that's
very
something
true.
that we really have to pay attention to when you are line shopping, is to make sure you're getting that line that you want, because that FC Sniper might cause that bait to run deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Berkeley Trilene 100%, which is a thicker gauge 10-pound, that bait is going to run higher in the water column. So just stuff to look out for. And I feel like that's a very underlooked part of line shopping.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I'll say a little thing that I learned from Hank Cherry when I travel with him, because obviously he's the jerkbait master. He almost solely only jerks with 15-pound. That's all he uses. But like we were talking about earlier, you're adjusting how deep that bait goes based on the weight of your hooks.
Mm-hmm.
And having a heavier hook in the front, back, how it's going to sit in the water, etc. Like there's a lot of intricacies that I won't get into, but we kind of disagree on this. Like, he just solely does 15, and it definitely works for him. I mean, look, but
Yeah.
I mix it up a lot. I go anywhere from 8 to 12, but 12-pound, like Andy was just saying, I use Gamma Edge. 12-pound edge is probably equivalent to what he's throwing, diameter wise with 15.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I would go to the same too. I mean, I have jerked on that heavier line too, if I'm fishing shallower, and it works fine too. But the other thing to consider when you're using heavier line is you're muting the action of your bait. So when you're using that lighter line, it's allowing it to just glide more naturally and hunt and do all that stuff. But when you are going heavier line, it just kind of just lessens the side to side, lessens the action just a little bit. And sometimes you want that. But I mix it up just based on, the action I want to get it.
Now we're still on this jerkbait talk real fast. Kind of walk through what your rod and reel setup would be, because I think we're very similar in this.
Yeah,
but I know
sure.
you can be anywhere from like a 6'4" or 5 rod, what like Megabass makes, and then some people are like, I gotta throw it on a 7'5" spinning rod. So what does Destin DeMarion use for all around jerkbait fishing for smallmouth?
See, I think this is a very wide range of options that could work, and there is people that throw on a spinning rod. I'm like, what are you doing? But it works for them, and you can make that work. When I started out, I threw it on a spinning rod because I didn't know how to use a bait caster. I mean, that was only like 12 years ago that I didn't know how to use a bait caster. But now I'm pretty dialed into what I use, and I very much prefer a bait caster. A, because when I set the hook, the line's not slipping, and B, I just have much more control with that winch of a reel to do what I need to do and find them and stuff. But I'm pretty much, I use a 6'9" to a 7-foot rod. I don't like to go over 7 because this is also a height thing. So I'm like 6 foot 6'1", and anything bigger than a 7 foot, it's hard to keep it from hitting the water when you're jerking with it. So I don't want my rod hitting the water, inhibiting, the action and the cadence, etc. So that 6'9", 6'10", that range is really good. I like, depending on what company you use, I use Cashin's. They've got good topwater jerkbait rods in the Icon series. I use the 6'9" medium heavy. It's an extra fast, so it recoils really quickly, but it's got a good taper on it, so it allows me to get those little jerks without pulling the bait because there's enough, tip to it, enough flex. But then when that fish bites, you're able to react fairly quickly. Like I tried over the years using glass rods, cranking type rods. There's not enough feel to me.
Yeah.
Composites are good, but pretty much graphite. Graphite is the best, use sensitivity and stuff. But you need that good taper of like a medium to medium heavy rod, depending on what company. Because some companies' mediums are a medium heavy. Some people's medium heavy are basically a medium in my, world. But that having that extra fast recoil with that one that has a good kind of taper to it, that's really what I like.
And then what gear ratio reel are you using?
Fast.
Always 8 to 1,
use
10.
8 to 1.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. 8 to 1 all day.
Same reason as the extra fast. I want to be able to react.
Yep.
I want that reaction. I want to be able to pick up line because a lot of times you're twitching slack. That's something I was taking guys out. We were fishing on Smith Mountain Lake, and a lot of times when I'm taking out people for Dirt Edge, there are people that don't fish a ton, even when I'm guiding. And I was paying attention because I was getting a ton of bites on jerkbait, be it striper, bass, whatever. And the one guy was like, "Here, dude, throw jerkbait. Like, you need to throw this." And he was throwing it, not getting bit. I kept getting bit. My buddy in the back was getting bit. And, I was like watching him, and I was like, he's jerking tension. So he's keeping his line tight. So it's advancing the bait and it's killing the action. You just twitch with the slack in your line. It's going to just make that bait dart, 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 and not like pulling it, far. You're keeping it in that same place. It's going to stay in that fish's face, especially when they're lethargic and the water's cold. That's really important to be twitching that slack.
So let's stay on the jerkbait.
And then he caught a 4-pound fish off of active target. I went over. I was like, "There's one about 40 feet over there. They're suspended." Twitch. Oh, he missed it. Twitch. Got him.
Fantastic. And that's the biggest thing that people have a misconception or have the hardest time doing, because when you're learning how to fish bait, like jerkbaits, you think when you jerk it on tight line, you're getting the most action because you can feel the bait very well. But the biggest thing with the jerkbait is, like I found with the stunner, and Bailey might kill me for talking about this, but with the stunner, I found if I have the slack line, the right amount, like the right amount of slack in that line, when I hit it, I can actually get that stunner to turn almost in a complete 180.
It's a cool thing to do with it too.
Yeah. So, and kind of like progressing here in the jerkbait talk, because the one thing we haven't talked about yet is largemouth fishing on the bays, right? Because there is a very good largemouth population in a lot of the bays.
You live too. I mean, there's good largemouth in the harbors and stuff.
And that's why I wanted to progress here with the jerkbait talk, because I find with these Lake Erie Bay largemouth and smallmouth, two entirely different cadences catches the largemouth from the smallmouth. With the largemouth, I find they want it very slow and methodical.
I would have that's funny because I was going to say the exact same thing. Yep.
Low to mid 40-degree water. So like we're talking 42 to 46-degree water. It's like twitch on that slack line, wait 8 to 10 seconds, twitch, real soft. So that bait is just slightly moving, waiting another 10 seconds and give it however you want to do your cadence. But the pause 6 to 10, 12, 14 seconds when that water's 42 to 46 degrees for the Lake Erie Bay largemouth. And then you can fish that same flat that you're catching largemouth on. You're freaking cracking that jerkbait with like 3-second pauses. The smallie will smoke it.
Oh yeah.
So it's funny how
I think I made this analogy on a podcast before, like a largemouth like sitting in a sofa just waiting for a potato chip to fall on his lap, where a smallmouth is a crackhead.
Yeah.
And they're just constantly tweaking and just like looking for something. You know what I mean?
It's funny. Like in the past week, I've been in the Finger Lakes because my Lake Erie at my end has just been complete mud. So when I have a day off, it's raining, snowing, blowing 30 miles an hour. So I drive an hour and a half in the snow to go catch largemouth on a jerkbait. And every time I would speed up my cadence, I would catch like a 5-pound smallie. And I'm like, you son of a gun, that's 41-degree water. And you are hitting this thing like a freight train. But the smallmouth, like,
surprise you.
They wouldn't even make like your line twitch on slack line. They would just come up, grab it, and sit there, and you go to twitch it, and you're just like, oh, yeah, there. It's like, what are you doing? It's that potato chip reference. It's so funny. And Bootleg actually has a really good question here. Favorite jerkbait for largemouth in the 55 to 60-degree range? I'll throw mine out there. I am starting to really like the re-range. It scares me every time I cast it, but I find it's an incredibly
sounds like your line snapping.
Oh, like it's like, what? Did my line just break? But
yeah, that thing is awesome though. That jerkbait is incredible.
Because you can work it still moderately slow, but it's so reactive and jumpy that it's a really good warm water, even for smallmouth in that 55 to 60-degree range. They're going to jump all over it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd say that one for sure. But, I mean, it's hard. Like, there's so many good ones. I mean, I still like the Mega Bass.
Yeah.
You know, it's got its place. I think it's losing a little bit of its effectiveness just because everybody throws it. But it still works. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's kind of funny. What is the one jerkbait that has like disappeared from the fishing scene? And I want to see if we have the same answer here because I have some in my box.
Disappeared, or like that's still good. That's kind of like lost.
Yeah, like nobody talks about it.
The pointer.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same exact thing. Yep, Lucky Craft pointer.
I was just going through my box, ironically, jerkbait box. And I was like, I had some in the bottom, like underneath stuff. And I was like, dude, these are still good. Why don't I throw them as much anymore?
Yeah.
Smithwick Rogue, I see a couple of those.
Yeah, I used to love the old, like the early 2000, like when KVD and Aaron Martins were cracking them in Pittsburgh on the old Smithwick Rogues, the suspended ones. I had some of like the pure chrome with the black barbs.
Yep.
And if you put suspend dots on them, you could cast those things a mile, but the new ones don't suspend right. Even with suspend
talking about? Dots. KVD caught him on the Strike King Wild Shiner. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't think it was out there.
I'm pretty sure they said that he was on the Wild Shiner, but he was throwing a Rogue.
Yeah, like the Rogue was the deal way back in the day. And then we have Chris here with an X-Wrap.
Yeah, dude. That thing used to be killer, and it still could be pretty good. I mean, I still got them in my box. There's no question because I used to murder them at Presque on that. And it still works. I'm sure. So, there's so many other ones that I like that you can catch them on so many different types of jerkbaits.
It's just funny with like the Lucky Craft pointer. Like you can go pointer, you can go Stacey version 2, which I believe was the suspending like micro jerkbait at the time, was smaller bodied and it was deeper diving. That was a really good one.
The +1 Junior.
Yeah. +1 Junior I really like a lot. Jackal Squirrel, which you can't find anywhere unless you want to way overpay for it on eBay. Ooh, that's a good one too.
There is more awesome jackal baits that are never appreciated until after they discontinue them than any other company, period.
It's
Jackal
so
comes
sad.
out with such cool baits, nobody really buys them, like, because they're different or whatever. And then low key, people have been mashing them on them, not talking about it. Then they come back and everybody wants to pay $50, $100 for them.
Oh, Chris wants to know if we have tried the Nishine jerkbait. I personally have not.
I have not either.
But
I've heard like it's good, but
my buddy
hasn't made the cut for me yet.
Paul Castellano, I'm sure you know that name, Destin.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But he loves the Nishine jerkbait, and I think it's like a 115 smelt or something is what they call it. It is really. He's sent me some pictures of some giants caught on that thing, and I just haven't bought one. Yeah, they all work.
So here's another one that I just got that's almost impossible to find is the new Shimano World Minnow.
Yeah.
I've got a couple. Those look pretty sick. I haven't really got to throw them much, but they look
till next week.
Yeah, right.
It's jerkbait season. Yeah, I want to get my hands on some of those as well. And then JP Harrell, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, says Jackal is the king of discontinuing great baits, and that is a 100% like truth comment there.
Hey, but some of them they end up bringing them back because there's so much demand for them after the fact.
Like the Jackal Bling.
There you go.
Back with like all these new colors. Even like some of their soft plastics are incredible too. And like it's
frogs,
insane.
Soft plastics, all that stuff. There's so many good little sleeper baits that people just don't really hype up that much.
Yeah. So, it's crazy. So now we're done with the jerkbait talking now that we were stuck on it for like 25 minutes, right? So let's move into the fish are starting to get on beds. The water temp is 55 to 65 degrees after that first big full moon, middle of May. What is your go-to tactic? Where do you look for spawning fish and how do you catch them?
So I'm going to look where I'm at. It's a lot of sand. So it's all pretty much hard bottom. But you're going to want to look for sand that's got, some cobble, some gravel in it, because usually that's what they're going to fan out and lay their eggs on. So places like that, there's areas that are more soft bottom, generally not as smallmouthy for spawning. They want a little bit harder bottom. You might find some largemouth in some of those areas, especially up real shallow, because it can be a little bit harder bottom, up a little bit shallower in some of those like mucky, muddy type bays. Yeah. But the smallmouth like the sand. They like the sand. They like a little bit of gravel. In the lake, they're going to spawn on shale. Just that's pretty much all there is. But they come in and spawn in sandy places, though.
Yeah. That's crazy that they spawn on shale because that's a pretty hard rock.
Yeah, well, a lot of times there's just like little depressions in the shale, different things that they don't really have a choice because like most of our shore is shale, and it's shale till 20 feet out. You know what I mean? So they don't really have a choice. I mean, if there's some chunk rock, that's always going to be good, but little just depressions in the shale, someplace they're not just going to get pummeled with wind. But that's why most of the fish come in the bays and stuff to spawn because, it's all dependent on wind direction. And if you get some spawners coming up, we're just the South Shore. We're pretty much not protected from any wind except south winds. So this time of year, I mean, there's a lot of other, northwest, all those kind of winds coming. If they're coming up to spawn, that can completely ruin it.
Mm-hmm.
It pushes all that muddy water, and I've seen it a million times on the lake. And that's why the lake doesn't have as prevalent of a spawn as the bay because, and the bay is all around the creeks, the rivers, that all around the Great Lakes and stuff. Unless there's other stuff to protect them, weeds. Like St. Clair's got some weeds, different things there. We don't really have that. It's just exposed shale. And it's just, there's humongous fish out there that spawn. I've taken clients out, we've had 29, 30-pound bags. But I tell them if we go out there, I was like, we might not catch as many fish, but they're going to be big ones. And it depends on the weather. Like if it gets muddied up there, it can ruin it big time.
100%. It's crazy though. Like on my end of the lake, because we're only talking like 80 miles, 90 miles difference between you and I and Erie and Buffalo, right? So like on my shoreline in Buffalo, because the prominent wind blows all the wind into my shoreline, the fish, we almost never have like main lake spawners, at least what I can find. If we do find beds, they literally drop their eggs, get out with like a day or two, and the male won't even stay because they know it can get muddy quick. All of our big main lake spawners are all on the Canadian side because there's so many bays on the Canadian side up here.
Plus, it's a lot protected from those northerly winds.
Yeah, northerly, southwest winds, west winds, it's all protected. Only thing that really messes them up is an east wind. And once we get into like the end of May, we almost never have an east wind. It's always south or southwest.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. And you and I have talked about that, and Jeff and I have talked about it a lot, like at length, because I'm like, dude, there's got to be fish that spawn on that South Shore because there are here. But our fish don't have a choice. If they live out there and they don't go in the bay or something, where else are they going to spawn? I mean, they're going to spawn in bays, harbors, rivers, like that are protected. And there's some fish that just aren't going to swim that far and go there. They just spawn out there. But it's much more low success rate as far as spawning out there.
Yeah. But if it is successful, those are always the biggest fish. Always.
Yeah. I've got a couple areas where I catch them spawning and staging to spawn, where I almost always catch a 6-pounder plus fish every time I go there. And I've caught multiple 6s on days, because – and I've seen even bigger ones that just, either followed a bait or something and wouldn't get it. But that's just where they go every year. And it's hard to find those places on the lake, really hard to find.
Because they're so nichey, and they'll be like the size of a car. Like there'll be very small, very specific areas where they actually –
I mean, I have a spot that's no bigger than this bedroom. This is my daughter's bedroom, but now it's also my quasi fishing room until we get my garage done. But like it's no bigger than this. And if you're outside of that, you never get a bite. And if you're inside of it, you can sit there and just catch them all day as they're staged.
Dialed in on Lake Erie and Presque Bay. So if anybody is listening here and wants to go fishing with Destin, you'd want to book your trip after the spawn because it sounds like he's pretty booked up, slightly like I am. But man, it's going to be
out for next year.
It's going to be
summer's fun too. It's a totally different dynamic, but summer's fun too.
Summer, Destin's going to be sneaking up to Buffalo to guide. I can already see it. It's like, I'm coming, guys.
I love sneaking up there. It's a lot closer now. I love sneaking up there and fishing with you and Jeff. That's for sure.
Yeah. And now the family can come, and Amanda and Emmy can hang out with Megan and Eva, and we'll all go fishing and get some chicken wings. Can't wait.
Yes, exactly.
But now, we'll finish it up here. We're going the end of spring, right before summer, because a lot of the spawning ends at the end of May. So let's go into the post-spawn to wrap up here. What is your favorite way to target post-spawn smallies down around the bays in the Great Lakes and Lake Erie and Presque Bay? Where would you look to find those fish first?
I mean, you're going to have some fish that kind of just hang around. A lot of times those ones are kind of funky.
Yeah.
The ones that are pulling off and, staging out on the, the first break, the second break, that's pretty much my favorite way, most efficient way to target them. I mean, whether it's, humps, little drops, ledges, all that kind of stuff with hard spot rock, wherever the bait seems to be, depending on, the water temp, etc. That's what I'm going to look for. I mean, my favorite way to target fish that are kind of in that mid depth is definitely a crankbait. But more often than not, you got to slow down and drag them, especially in that post spawn. They're just kind of funky. But if you can drag something real slow, through those areas, whether it's a Ned rig, drop shot tube, something of that nature, that's generally the best way to catch them. It can be slow and tedious, and a lot of times they scatter out a little bit. But that's the most efficient way I've found to catch them. But if I can find them on a crankbait, I've had some really, really good days doing that too.
It's funny you mentioned a crankbait because my instant thought process, like when they're coming off that spawn and going into that post spawn, it only happens like 2 or 3 days a year. But if I'm stuck behind the walls in Buffalo, I can usually get them to eat like a popper or a whopper plopper, or like a walking
Which is
type bait.
crazy.
It's the most insane bite in the world when it happens because it has to be like perfect conditions. And unfortunately, it's like the best time to be out in the deep water as you experience. Was that your first time coming up in June this past spring when that deep water post spawn bite was just going insane?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah. So that same week, usually right around then, is when I get that post spawn popper bite because there's mayflies everywhere. And
Yes.
like, you want to talk about a 5.5 pound, 21, 22-inch fish coming up and eating a little Lucky Crab G Splash 70. It's like World War II submarine depth charging for smallmouth coming up and hitting that thing all day long. It is so much fun, but it literally lasts for 3 days. And I probably haven't hit it. When was the last time I actually caught a topwater smallmouth? It's probably been 4 years now because I just haven't hit it on like right on the money. I'd still try it, but there's such a little tiny spot where it just explodes.
Yeah, I mean, that's not something that I've really got on where we live. And I don't know if that's based on you guys having river current and stuff there or whatnot.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, too, we have cottonwood really bad post spawn. And it's hard to fish almost anything shallow because, especially like a moving bait, because it just gets bogged down in the line.
Yeah. Might be time to throw like a micro topwater popping frog.
Yeah.
That might
I
be
just
a way
bought
to
one
catch
of
them.
those.
Awesome.
Like it's like this big.
So, like, let's real quick here before we end, let's give the largemouth some love in these bays because, you know, down in Ohio, there's a lot of guys who just specifically target largemouth in those bays, and every bay has them. So, in the post-spawn funk, personally, I like to go flipping for them. Any type of like really green vegetation.
Oh, yeah.
We have some milfoil coontail in our bays. So, in reeds and spots, I'm almost always going big rod flipping for them. Are you virtually the same deal? Maybe a spinnerbait?
I think on presque and a lot of the bays, yeah, it's definitely like a flipping thing. And if you can find them in the grass, they can be really wadded up pretty good. The other thing, I try not to do as much of what I try not to target them the same way as most people do. I like to really target at that brim spawn.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I mean, if you can get on them with a frog sometimes, Senko, just bomb cast, like a weightless Senko, wacky Senko, stuff like that. Chatterbait, swim, like that kind of stuff. Because there's definitely, those bluegill and things are starting to spawn, towards that post spawn bass phase. And you can get on them pretty good doing that too. And some of them spawn a little bit deeper, and that's where, you can flip them and do all that. But there is quite a few that spawn shallow, and a lot of those really big bass will target the bluegill and be picking them off with their beds too.
Too much fun. Now,
Popper, there's your popper too.
So real quick, one last question from Bootleg Bass Fishing here. He wants to know what your go-to flipping bait and weight is for post-spawn largemouth.
I think you're kind of be of the same mindset. I mean, flipping a Senko is pretty hard to beat.
Yeah.
It's mimicking a bluegill. It's really, subtle. It's a great way to do it. Depending on how deep you are, really the weight. A lot of times lighter is good. 3/16, quarter, something like that. But I mean, if you're deeper, you want to get down there quicker. 5/16 to a quarter or a half, something like that.
That you cannot beat, like, and I'll reiterate this over and over and over again. And I'm very open about it because I still feel like no matter how much I talk about it, people will not do it. And that's flip a Senko from post spawn all the way into the fall. It's like my number one go-to bait. But if they're on a bluegill spawn, it's kind of hard, and you might get mad at me for this one, Destin. I found the mother load of old black and red package pit bosses from like 5 years ago when Berkeley discontinued them.
Oh, dude, I got so many of those things.
There's something about a pit boss during that bluegill spawn on like a 1/4 ounce weight that just drive giant largemouth mad.
I'm a big fan of the rage bug. Whenever
Rage
that
bug
came out, it
too.
was actually the structure bug, and they changed the name to the rage bug. But whenever that one came out, that thing can do about anything. It's good on flipping it. It's great. It's really good on a wobble head too.
Yeah,
I've even caught a lot of smallmouths doing that with a wobble head. But there's so many things you can do with it. And it catches them.
it's a great bait as well. And it's funny, like I used to be like probably like 4 or 5 years ago, I used to be 100% all the time rodent or beaver because
Same.
you could cut the tail and get like some movement out of it, or keep the appendages sealed together and it'd just be a straight do nothing fall bait and they would crack it. But it's always for me 1/4 ounce. Like I'll start light 3/16 quarter, and when I flip, I almost never go above half because we just don't get matted vegetation anywhere in New York, even in our base, where I have to go heavier than half to get it through. And I'm a straight fluoro guy when it comes to flipping as well. 15 to 20 pound test.
Same. We will get a little bit of matted up eelgrass and chopped up eelgrass mats because especially the pleasure boats as the year progresses. So you can punch and use some heavier weights, but most of the time early on, nah, you're never using much more than like a half ounce.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't rule out like a power shot either. Power shot is a very, very good presentation for flipping.
Yeah, thanks for spilling some juice. I love power shotting. I've caught some really big fish on a power shot in tournaments the last few years. Like I'm like, I need a kicker. I'll pick that up and go through the same area that I was just catching them flipping a Senko, and usually pick up a really good bite. That you don't get a lot of bites on it, but it's usually a good one. But
absolutely,
and maybe this is like a episode we can do sometime in the future with whoever wants to do it, is talk about power shotting because it's such an underutilized technique. Sure. And there's only a few baits that you could really fish on it effectively, in my opinion, because your normal drop shot weights just don't work the same. So maybe that's a cool little episode idea for later on.
That is a good episode idea.
Anything else you want to talk about tonight, Destin, before we let all of these awesome viewers who tuned in and asked some questions go?
Yeah, I'm thankful we've had such good questions, a lot of really engaged people, and I appreciate that. I mean, it's been fun. We've really gotten in depth on a lot of stuff, but no, I mean, I'm gonna start guiding here this weekend, and I'll guide every single weekend up until the summer, and probably a little bit more, afterwards. But it's going to be fun. I can't wait. I haven't been out yet because I've been on the road, and this is generally my second favorite time of the year. I'm a fall guy, A, because there's not as many boats out, and B, because it's gangbusters. You can catch them on so many different things, and it's fun. They get wadded up like they do in the spring. They're not going to spawn. They're just literally feeding up as much as they can. But spring, they're feeding up to spawn. So right now, this window is some of the most fun fishing you're going to have, fishing the Great Lakes, especially like the bays and stuff as they're coming in to spawn. I mean, intercepting them. You can have those 50, 100, 150 fish days this time of year. I mean, I know Bailey and Jeff and I had 180 last fall, but I mean, that's totally doable. You can do that this time of year too. And you never know. You might just run into one of those magical days this time of year when all those fish are just filtering through to go to spawn. Because, I mean, sometimes you can side image and see 50 to 100 fish, little dots on the side, because there's so many fish pulling up in these places, getting concentrated in these little bays and stuff. So
and definitely, if you find them, they bite. Always. They always bite if you find them like that.
Yeah,
always.
For the most part. We do get a lot of pressure. I think we probably get the most pressure of any of these, little bays and stuff off the Great Lakes in this time of year. So they can get a little stingy, but I mean, it's almost just always just the timing and throwing the right bait. And once you figure that out, you can keep catching them. So they're not the smartest fish in the world.
For sure. Well, random question here. What is the furthest away license plate on a boat and trailer you have seen come to Presque in the
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to think what I have seen. I don't know if I've seen anyone like out west or anything. I can't think of any. I mean, we get a lot of Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia. We get quite a few Ohio, New York, and stuff. But I can't think of anybody like super, super far away, really, offhand at least.
I've seen Texas plates and like Alabama.
Here
in Buffalo.
Oh, in Buffalo.
Yeah.
No, I remember you said like, dude, I saw these guys from Alabama were talking to. I was like, oh my gosh, they go up to Buffalo for like that's crazy.
Yeah, they come up for like usually like a week at a time, and then like I remember that specifically. I was talking to those guys. This was probably 3 years ago, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna go up to the Thousand Islands next." And it was like the middle of May. I go, "Don't go bass fishing because they patrol for that stuff up there." He's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "You can't catch them till the third Saturday of June."
Didn't they just move it up? Didn't they move it up like one week?
So New York State just flatlined their regulations. So bass season opener is on June 15th every single year going forward.
But
and
I think
walleye
Ontario made it that way too, right?
Yep, June 15th.
There you go.
It's flat June 15th, but St. Lawrence, Jefferson, and there's one other county I can't think of it because it's like 5 hours away and I never get up there. Their season closes November 30th and to June 15th. You cannot target bass, period, artificial, nothing. And the rest of New York State, we can go catch them all year long on artificial baits. And then Lake Erie, I don't know if Erie, PA does this or not, but New York State on Lake Erie has a trophy season from December 1st.
Yeah, we have the same.
So they extended yours to December 1st through the June 15th. Because ours used to be May 1st through June 15th, but you can catch them artificially.
Yeah, I think ours is somewhat around that because a lot of times we have early season tournaments. I think it changes over in mid-April here.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes to you can keep one over 20 inches. So you can have a team tournament, keep 2 fish, two big ones or whatever until, mid-June or whatever.
Yeah, those tournaments are crazy because every time it takes like 14, 16, well, not 16, 13 and a half to 14 pounds to win. You're just like,
yeah, it's absurd.
Like I've never caught, like personally, I think I have one fish over 7 pounds I caught on a worm harness, right? Like it doesn't count trolling for walleye. But I'm like
in that tournament that you and I fished, our 2 biggest would have been pushing 14 pounds.
Yeah, and they weren't even 7s. One was like 6, 8, 9, I think your big one was. And then I had one that was like 6.
It was pretty dang close to it because we held them. We're like, I don't know which one's bigger.
That day. Like I'm insane. So, but on that note, thanks for coming on, man. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
Man. It's been a while since we've seen each other face to face. We've obviously talked on the phone and stuff a bunch, but
soon that'll have to change. We'll have to get out fishing because we're only like an hour and 20 minutes away ish.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, we have
hopefully I'm up in Buffalo next
center
week.
spots too. Yeah, let me know what's going on about that. We'll figure it out.
Definitely will, man. Thanks for having me. It's always fun. I love talking smallmouth, especially talking fishing with you because always get into some cool subjects.
Yeah, it was an absolute ride, and I can't wait to go catch some on jerkbaits. It's all I've been catching on this spring, so I'm like dying to go tomorrow.
I have a feeling we're going to blast them this weekend on it.
Yeah, you will. Chris here said PIB is almost into the 50s, so that's Jerkbait 101 water right there. So for everybody listening, I'm just going to end it here in a second. We truly appreciate it. If you don't mind, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. If you're a new viewer, leave a comment and a like. We greatly appreciate it. And also, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, if you made it all the way here to the end, please leave us a comment and a review. But for now, we will see you guys on Friday.
Thanks, guys.